I'm so lucky today to have the one and only Barbara Corcoran joining me for a conversation, which I imagine will be a little bit about everything: the state of the real estate market, entrepreneurship, of course, Shark Tank, anything she has on her mind. She is the dynamo of that show in business on social media. And as I witnessed this fall, her office running circles around her team, a number of whom are half her age, a third her age. But let's not focus on age because age isn't important. I love her energy, and I think you will find it contagious as well. Barbara is a New Jersey native. She famously had 20 jobs by the time she was 23, quit her job as a waitress and began a real estate company with a $1,000 loan. She would eventually go on to found the Corcoran Group, sell that, make her name as one of the few women in real estate running circles around the men. Most recently, she's been a co-host and EP of Shark Tank, where she's invested in nearly 100 businesses. She, of course, is prolific on social media, written multiple books. And if you want your regular fix, I highly recommend her podcast, Business Unusual. Barbara Corcoran, thanks for spending some time with me.
Thanks, Mosh, for that great promotion. Thank you.
So you wear a bunch of hats, but I want to begin with real estate because everyone in my world is either in trying to buy a house, just bought a house, looking to buy a house, and is just totally trying to get their head around the real estate market. So I'd love, just from your perspective, given all of the years you've spent in this industry, give us a state of play right now. How do you describe the state of the real estate market? Where were we? Where are we going? What is the Barbara Corcoran 10,000 foot look?
Well, I join everybody out there in saying it's the most competitive market and the most difficult market I've ever seen for home buyers. It's also the most lucrative market and delicious kind of selling market for the people who own houses who want to sell them. So the losers on the home buyers, but yet, despite the fact that overbidding is the norm when you're trying to get a home, going over the ask price today, despite the fact that interest rates are going up, and they've gone up substantially, as you know, very, very, very recently, the appetite for houses has not diminished at all. In fact, people are almost like raging dogs wanting to get their hands on a house, right? So it's been the most competitive market, but also the most desirable market. And I have never seen the likes of it in the entire time I've been in the real estate business, which has been since the 1970s. With the one exception, if I might mention, New York City. I remember in the early 80s, one year I used to track the sale prices because there were no public records on sale prices. So I used to track them myself. And I remember in one year, I think it was 1981, 82 maybe, prices went up 66% in New York City to buy an apartment. After I saw that, I thought I was seeing a miracle. I didn't think I would ever see that again. And we don't have, of course, those kind of prices now, but we had a 20% increase in home prices, in rental prices in the last 12 months, 19% in sale prices. And I have never seen that kind of record amount of sales or a bigger hunger to own a home. And partially that's because of COVID. I think it's the emotional push, as well as a shortage of housing and the old supply and demand, making people so thirsty to have a house.
What advice are you given? We'll start with sellers. I mean, we're now 2 years into this market. If you haven't sold yet, you might be, in mind to sell, or you thought you got a deal earlier in COVID. What are the biggest pieces of advice you'd give to folks looking to sell right now?
Well, be greedy. I mean, I wouldn't want to be quoted as telling homeowners to be greedy, but this is your moment. I mean, you own a home, even a dog of a home, you're going to get overpaid for it, in my opinion. You have two groups of buyers out there. You have the everyday buyer who's desperate and competing with the next guy down the street. And then you have the buyers fueled by Wall Street, who are today buying almost a third, or 30%, I think is the real number, of homes in the most desirable sections of the country, which is the Sun Belt. So you've got to, you have two juicy populations who really want your home. The corporate buyer, who offers phenomenal terms, like I'll close in 30 days, drop all contingencies and all cash. Hard to say no to somebody like that, right? And you have people bidding up your price as you're negotiating. So the advice to them, I'm trying to think of a cautionary word. There really isn't a cautionary word. It's just grab the money and run. That's pretty much what the attitude of home sellers are. And there's enough buyers to make that scenario possible.
And as far as the buyers are concerned, I saw you were quoted recently as saying there's nothing to be gained by waiting. Though I have seen some analysts who said demand could soften as interest rates go up. What is your advice right now to especially first-time home buyers?
Well, sure. As interest rates go up, and they're now at 4%, so they're back to where they were 4 years ago, right? As interest rates go up, it's going to temper demand. But I'm not worried about that. I too read a lot on the real estate market, and there are some naysayers out there. I'm not saying that it won't temper demand, but it's certainly, I mean, interest rates, I would think, have to go up by 10% to knock out the market. I mean, so I'm not really worried about that. But if you're a home buyer, the sooner you buy, the better. I know it's not fun going out there and buying, and you've lost a lot of stuff, and you're overpaying for what you're buying. And it's not the house you had dreamed about, not even close. But the smartest thing in the real estate game, and I've learned this myself as a home buyer and as an investor, you got to get in the game. You got to be able to go back to the table with some chips on the table to play with. So unless you get your first home, that's the hardest home to get. Then you have the ability to trade up, and then you have a vehicle that keeps pace with inflation and rising home prices. Without that chip in the game early, you're left behind. You're left behind as it runs away from you, you know? And I learned that really as a very young person in New York City, because I bought my first studio apartment in Greenwich Village when I was 29, and then I got cold feet. I think I even told the board who turned me down that I had a trumpet player boyfriend. I was so scared. I had to get out of that deal. And, you know, it took me almost 7 years to buy my first studio. I couldn't keep up, and I was making a living. I was building a business, so I didn't have a lot of cash. It was all in my company, but I should have been able to buy a house sooner. But that's how long it took me to catch up and get in the game. And when I got in that game, I traded the studio for one bedroom for a 3-bedroom when I had my first baby. I remortgaged that to buy an investment property. I remortgaged the investment property. None of it would have ever been possible without having chips in the game. And so I think it's always sage advice to get into the game. If you're lucky, you get into it when prices are low. And that's when people are least comfortable, because they like to see their neighbor being excited just like them. When the neighbor's not excited, they're afraid. But to get in the game when prices are low is great. But if you have to get in it when prices are high, but by God, you have to get in it. I just think you have to play the game, get in the game.
And I think I know your answer to this, given you kind of went in that direction. But what of the when people are asking whether I should wait to buy my dream home versus, you know, the frustration of a starter home and then another home, even what you're describing, moving from, what is your advice as far as starter home versus waiting for your dream home?
Forget it. It doesn't fit this marketplace. You wait for your dream home. Let's say it's 20% more and prices go up another 20% in a year. Now it's 20% more than that 20%. You're in a race. You're playing with doomsday. No, I think you buy a home so you have something to trade up with, and you have to settle. I mean, nobody is getting what they want. Honestly, even the millionaires in New York City are settling for less than they want. They wanted the terrace, they wanted the 43rd floor, but they're buying on the 18th floor without the terrace. Nobody's happy. In a rising market, nobody's happy with what they have. So there's no sense feeling sorry for yourself. You just got to grab what you can, do the best you can.
Is there ever an advantage, depending on where you are in life, where you are financially, to renting over buying?
Sure, if you're in a place short term, you're crazy to buy. You know what? Unless you know that prices are at a bottom, and whoever knows that, all you could do is guess. Experts don't know when a bottom is. But when you're in a situation where you're going to be in a city or a town for a couple of years, it costs you too much on closing costs on both sides, one side and then the other side. So why would you buy? You got to rent. Even if you overpay for the rental, it's better off to rent. But with that exception, no. I mean, if you can't qualify for a mortgage, you have bad credit, you're going to rent. You have no choice. But if you have the option, I think you don't buy if you're somewhere short term. Doesn't make sense money-wise.
And when we look geographically across the country, is there anywhere that you would avoid, anywhere you think you can still get a deal? Especially now that we live in a world of remote work, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The best places to get a deal are in the Northeast and the Midwest. All right. The most affordable cities today are Cleveland, Buffalo, and Detroit, I think in that order, or maybe I mixed up one there. All right. prices are still cheap there. They're rising, but not at the rate the rest of the country. On the other hand, where you get your worst deal is in the leading cities of the Sun Belt. Austin, I think prices went up 40% last year. That seems unbelievable. Jacksonville, I think they went up 31%. And why is that? Because everybody wants to move to the Sun Belt today. You have better weather, lower taxes, and more friendly business environment. All right. So everybody's moving there. So to get a good deal today, yeah, you want to stay in the colder climates, which is not where people want to stay. They want to move out of it.
One of the trends I've noticed, and you mentioned it, you know, that a lot of homes now increasingly are owned by Wall Street, by some of these major financial firms. At the same time, we're seeing a housing shortage in the country. What do you make of Wall Street getting in the game here, and why did it take them so long to get in that game, and what impact is that having?
Well, you know, for them to get in the game, you have to have a rising market, or the numbers don't make any sense for the investors. You get a rising market, even if you do a half good job in that business, you're going to make money for your investors. So Wall Street has been increasing their share of the single family home market. And in a market where we're 4 million homes short already, where there's not enough supply, where interest rates are making home ownership more expensive, that is like, it almost has an additional crippling effect on the buyer. It's unfortunate because now today, you're not just competing with your neighbor, you're competing with Wall Street, and they have terms, like I mentioned earlier, that are very palatable to the home buyer. You know, why wouldn't you take that deal? 30 days, you know, no contingency, we're your baby, you know, people are going to accept them. But some of the Wall Street backed companies are coming in from outside the United States now, big funds that are buying a lot of houses. And so it's unfortunate for the individual home buyer because it exacerbates the problem, but it also, in my thinking, enters into the market an unstable card. Okay, because unlike a homeowner who will stick with their home in a tough time and almost go down with the ship, investors aren't that way. They're not emotionally involved. All right. And so if we were to have any sustained decrease in housing in the city, pardon me, in the country, I meant to say, we had sustained decrease in values, Wall Street is the first brave guys to run away, you know? And so, so it's a potential problem. So today, when you look at who's buying homes in America, 3% of the home purchases are being done by companies that are backed by Wall Street. And if you look in the Sun Belt, the most desirable section of the country, 30% of the homes that come to market are being bought by Wall Street. That's a sizable amount, and it's growing substantially. It's amazing, yeah.
Is that something that Washington needs to deal with at some point? Do you think, like, you know, I know most people in business are not fans of regulations and rules coming from DC, but are there parameters there that the folks in DC need to be thinking about?
I don't know what DC is thinking about. I'm sure everything's thought about and debated about, but no, the worst thing to happen would be some regulation, if that's what you're implying, put in there.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of red tape that costs money. You know, there's always a way around stuff when there's money to be made. So nah, it's just a layer of junk on top. Yeah.
Well, one final question in regards to Barbara's advice when it comes to real estate. You have a bunch of Gen Z and millennials, even in your office. What advice do you give them for dealing with this reality, especially speaking as an elder millennial myself? You know, we had the tech bubble, we had 9/11, we had a great recession, then we had COVID. We just feel totally screwed by the circumstances that we've lived in, especially when it comes to buying our first home or going to the next home. What advice do you give younger folks in terms of saving and how to get to that home?
Well, honestly, I don't find that most young people are saving. I don't think they have the wherewithal with the rate of inflation, the cost of living moving so fast, and also in lower paying jobs as you are when you're starting out the first 5 years in business. You know, you're usually not bringing home a ton of money so fast, right? I don't think they can save. I'm a believer, and I've advocated for this over the years in New York City, because New York City was always an expensive market in my brokerage that kids couldn't afford. And when I say kids at 40 years of age couldn't afford. And I was probably best at pitching 40-year-olds on going back to mom and dad and suggesting they become your partner in your apartment, give them half the earnings when you flip it or sell it in 5 years, and take the embarrassment out, because there's really really no way to keep up with the rising market or to get in it without a little help from your friends. With regard to the people that work in my business today, they're all very young people, but they were all savvy enough, having nothing to do with me, to their own credit, really. I should have given them good advice, but they're all savvy enough when the market was at the very bottom here in New York, which was about 2 years ago now, that they all renegotiated the rent, moved out of where they were living, and got a much better deal at a lower price in a bigger apartment. They took advantage of it. They got great deals. So everybody, it was sitting in a sweet spot. But lately, what's scary is those rents are coming, the renewals are coming up. I don't have any
Yeah.
advice. Maybe I'll have to give everybody big raises, but I don't want to. We'll have to see what happens.
Well, we should all be so lucky to work for you, Barbara. Let me know when you're hiring. We'll post those jobs with those big raises that you have coming.
No, I'm not promising them. I'm just kidding around here.
Oh, okay, all right, everyone, just be aware that that was a joke. One more question when it comes to real estate and in regards to technology. You've been in the business for a while. You've watched the trends evolve. What do you think is really cool that's going on out there in terms of real estate and tech? And by the way, at the same point, where do you think there's room for innovation for some great startup out there that can really help revolutionize that industry?
I see pitches all the time, particularly in the real estate space, in and out of Shark Tank. I haven't seen one that made any sense, honest to God. The best thing that ever happened to real estate was the internet. It took the control out of the hands of the brokers and handed it right into the hands of the actual buyers and sellers, because information was released. And when you release information to someone, you give them the power. All right. That's been the single best thing. Now, there's been a lot of innovation within the internet, but honest to God, I'm a little disappointed considering we've had it so long. Better virtual tours, tremendous programs to stay in touch with your customers and to solicit new customers, to target your audience, that kind of thing. But nothing really great out there that I have seen. Believe me, if I could think of it, I would do it myself. I think the biggest opportunity, potentially a maybe big opportunity, is the metaverse. I mean, when I heard that Snoop Dogg had sold the property right next to him in his metaverse, well, I can't even remember what the price of that was. I think it was $450,000 in Sandbox. You pay, some sucker paid $450,000 in Sandbox to live next to Snoop Dogg in a metaverse that you could argue doesn't even exist. Okay, it made me realize.
I'll add to that. Like, why do we assume that the metaverse has gravity in it? Why can't I have a floating home? Why do I have to buy a home on a piece of land?
Because you know what, it gives you a couple of things. It gives you bragging rights. Like that guy who bought that land was going to say, I live next to Snoop Dogg. He couldn't afford to do that in LA or any of his other homes. All right. So and you have proof of ownership, just like a deed in the metaverse. You own that particular link with your name on it. You live next to him, or you live on the sea, or you have a yacht. You could buy a yacht. You could buy commercial property. I think there's tremendous opportunity in the metaverse today. I really do. And I think particularly for the retail sector and the commercial sector. And when I say commercial sector, I mean, in a way, we're there already. I mean, we all do most of our meetings on Zoom. That's not the metaverse, but it's similar. In other words, people are meeting somewhere outside of the actuality of a physical space. And wouldn't you rather have your meeting on a yacht where you could look out the window and see the water, show off to your friends the surfaces of your yacht? Of course, you're not really there. But if all the friends are willing to meet there and people are willing to meet, we've had a lot of concerts in the metaverse. That's proof of concept right there. I think it's a complicated, uncertain world, but ripe with opportunity and ripe with pitfalls of losing a lot of money. No, there's great opportunity in the metaverse. I feel so certain about it. I'm trying to think of how to get my hands around and take advantage of it. And I just kind of concluded that I'm never going to get my hands around. You just have to take a shot, which I'm good at. I like taking a lot of shots and then succeeding at a few,
When you look at like NFTs and the metaverse, does it remind you, I mean, as you've watched trends through your career of previous moments? Because right now there's a lot of naysayers, and frankly, there's a lot of people who are just trying to understand it. Why does the metaverse excite you so?
Well, everything's exciting. I think if you're a risk taker, and I am an entrepreneur, and I'm a dreamer, everything's exciting when you can't define a limitation of how far you could go. So even though I don't know the road or the path as to how to take advantage, it's very appealing to realize there's no stop sign at the end of that road. I'm here in New York City real estate. I hope I did. I hope my young staff executed the order. I think I bought the Central Park Zoo last week. That makes I know it sounds stupid, right? Like, why would I want that zoo? Because it's cool to say, do you know I own the Central Park Zoo? I also bought my co-op building that I live in, which I now own one unit in real life. I bought the whole damn building. I can't wait to tell my arrogant investment bankers in the elevator, hey, did you hear I bought the building? It's stupid. It's for sport, but it's good for my ego. It's a lot of fun. And you never know, it's kind of good. I bought, sadly, I was late on it. I bought my first NFT in the world of women for $30,000. I hated to pay the $30,000 because 2 weeks before it was $8,000. So what was I, a fool? No. But there's enough people that believe in that, and it's a good platform, that it's now worth $40,000. Will I sell it to make my $10,000? No, but now I'm smart. Hey, did you hear I bought nothing for $30,000 and the nothing is worth $40,000? It's crazy, right? But if you have enough believers, I have learned if you have enough believers, you can make something a reality that isn't a reality. And and I just believe that's the nature of this whole thing that's happening.
So that leads me to a question: as you make these bets in the metaverse back here in the universe, what it's probably hard for you to define this, but maybe you have one. What is the best bet you ever made, Barbara?
In real life?
In real life, yes.
Betting on myself to start my own business, which I wasn't confident, but I bet on myself. And thank God, I mean, not that I had a bad time waitressing. I mean, I was a great waitress, and I always knew my whole life I could go hit the floor and be a waitress again. So what's really to be afraid of if you don't mind going back, right? That was the best bet. But if you're asking me in a financial sense, which is probably where you're going with this, I would say buying my first townhouse in Greenwich Village, because I was itching to enter the real estate market in the village from uptown. Nobody was down there, and I could smell it was a moneymaker. Everybody loved visiting the village. Nobody lived there. But I couldn't find an office space. So I just bought the townhouse, and I think I paid $80,000 for it. I didn't know where the hell I was going to get the down payment, but like everything, you give yourself a deadline, you find a way, right? So when I closed on that building, I never took it serious. I at least had an office space, and we cleaned up in the downtown market early. We got such a head start because of that. But that $80,000 building is worth today, God, what is it worth? I really don't even know. I don't check because I don't plan on ever selling, because my lucky charm, I can't even imagine. It's probably worth $30 million, I would say. Wow. Big ass building. Okay. But on the back of that building, I bought a second building. On the back of that building, a third, fourth, fifth, sixth. And I became a real estate investor. Again, to my earlier point that you got to get in the game. So I'm not trying to be arrogant, like buy your first townhouse. No, your brownstone, with income producer, not that, but whatever you're aspired to. I'm just such a believer in real estate. It's really the most assured, slow way of getting very, very rich. It just is.
What do you make of people who are concerned about being house poor, right? Like, how much is stretching too much? Is there a rule of thumb that you give people?
No, because you know what? It depends upon how much you want what. I mean, if you're going to be miserable and biting off the head of your spouse every night because you can barely get a good meal going, right? Because you're so house poor. I can't imagine justifying anything like that, because you're going to have a miserable life, and you could be dead in 10 years. So maybe all you really got to live was those 10 years of a miserable life. But about stretching yourself and giving yourself a timeline and working your buns off to get what you want as a starter, I think sacrifice is a part of the game. Unless, of course, you have rich folks as parents, we could call them up. Then you get your cake and eat it too, right?